Welcome to the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. The pandemic taught us a lot of lessons, but one of them was survival is first. And that's, of course, survival for the individual, but it's also survival for the business. And for a long time, we kind of thought in the business world that, well, profit's the most important thing, and I'll work on culture when I can. But the pandemic made it clear the maximum profit comes from those organizations who have optimized a people-first culture. So that's what the podcast is dedicated to. Our guest today is Todd Ausherman, and he's the CEO of Notaroo, but clearly not his first rodeo. I'm gonna let him talk about some of the businesses he's had before. And Notaroo is a place that's kind of shaken up the traditional world. Their tagline on their website is cultivating calm from the chaos of loan processing. So any of us who've ever had a loan on a house or a mortgage, we know how fearful, chaotic, confusing, aggravating that process can be. So we're going to let him in a few minutes share how they rip that chaos out and bring us calm. Todd's a graduate of University of San Diego Law School. He's practiced in a number of ways, certainly as an entrepreneur. And on his LinkedIn profile, I found it perfect that he describes himself as an entrepreneur, well-doer, and student. And I can tell you, having worked with him, I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who's a better student, because he and I'll have a conversation, and 5 months later, he can remember it word for word. Most of the time, people forget everything I tell them. Todd remembers everything. So it's always a pleasure to work. Todd, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I appreciate the kind words and that introduction. Yes, and you know, a lot of our work together over the years. I think that's kind of why we have such a synergistic relationship. Is we understand what the goal is, and how everything sort of plays together, and this idea of business as organism. Not as this just thing. It's a living, breathing thing. And when we talk about stuff like culture, for example, that describes the organism. Those are the traits of the organism. And specifically about revenue and profit and all of that. That's the food. And you are what you eat. And your organization is as an organism is what it eats.
Amen. And that's the thing that CEOs we'll talk about things, and they're talking about profits and sales and all that kind of stuff. And then they'll say, yeah, and I got to work on my culture. And I can't always say it as clearly as I'd like to, but you get the culture you earn, and every decision you either make or don't make is impacting every one of your employees, current and future, every one of your customers, current and future, and your partners. And so when we're out there trying to make money, we got to remember we're having a huge impact on our culture. So, and that's one of the reasons I'm so glad you're here today, because I've had a chance to work both with you and then with Notaroo, and share with us, about your background, because you've done some cool stuff. And how did it get you to Notaroo? And where did you get the idea? Because I look at Notaroo as a disruptive, very cool thing that really helps the end customer, the person out there trying to get their home loan done and all that kind of stuff. So share a little of that history and how you got to Notaroo and why it's important.
Yeah, you bet. As you mentioned in the intro there, my background is legal, and when I graduated law school in 2005 and was waiting for my bar exam results, at that time the mortgage business was really hot. This is pre-2008 crash, so. Everybody and their brother, it seemed like, was in the mortgage business or starting a mortgage company. And in law school, I studied employment law. So what I was doing around California was I was helping a lot of these small businesses get their handbooks in place and make sure that they were following very strict California guidelines on meal and rest periods and misclassification of employees and all of those things. And that's kind of how I found my way into the mortgage business. I was doing some work, for a firm as an intern while I was waiting for my bar results, and saw what was happening in the mortgage world, and just thought, well, this is pretty exciting that, you have these people that are kind of young and don't seem to have a ton of experience or all this training in business, and they're starting businesses. So, very, very much in short order after that, when I did pass the bar, I was able to just flip that over and to get a broker's license. And I began my sort of solo practice, which we'll get into a little bit. But I also started my first mortgage brokerage, and that was sort of the entrance to the mortgage world. And then over the course of time, I kept leveling up, and ultimately, when it was time for me to sort of take a step back and figure out what I wanted to do as a new iteration, as a sort of an act two, I really wanted to get into technology. And what I was really impressed about with technology is its ability to solve those areas of screaming pain in a business process. And that's really where Notaru came from, was when I was, running mortgage companies and lending companies, there was a lot of pain at the close of the transaction. And that's when things would just go berserk. And there's all these different plates that are spinning and all these balls being juggled in the air. And there's tons and reams of paper and borrowers and co-borrowers. And there's a lot of opportunity for chaos there. And, when there's opportunity for chaos is probably going to show up. So the idea behind Notaru was, we can do this a little bit better. And we can do this by bridging communication, and we could take some simple technological advances here and insert them here. And we can really make this process not as tedious and chaotic and frustrating as it is for a lot of folks. We can make it smoother. And that's sort of our true north, that we talk about, certainly in revenue sciences. Our true north is to bring calm to the chaos. And that's very much the part of our culture here at Notaru. And we harp on it at every single meeting. And that's our guiding principle.
Well, Todd, that's so interesting, because having, I haven't been quite as deep in that industry as you, but the observation of that industry is it's typically very, mercenary. Everybody's in it for a short-term, quick hit, in, out, make my money and go play golf or whatever it is they go do. So you must get some interesting reactions from some people when you start to talk about what you guys do. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And timing is everything, right? And I think that the mortgage business is growing up just like every business, and understanding that there's a lifetime value associated with borrowers and with clients. And you're right. When I first got into it, it was very much a one-off type of a thing. You got a borrower, or you closed a loan, and that was that. You didn't really think that much about it. But people have wisened up to say, oh, hey, wait a minute. If someone is perhaps, getting a purchase now, they're probably going to refi it at some point. Wouldn't that be great if they came back to us? And well, if they have, friends, or if they have, the next generation they're going to be buying a house. Well, wouldn't it be great if we were able to secure that business? So that's the part there where we're able to start those conversations for the lenders that are thinking about the lifetime value of their borrowers versus hey, let's just get somebody in and, get them refied or get them a purchase and move on. So that's our niche, or the people that sort of really focus on that borrower experience and the determination of the lifetime value.
Well, and you go beyond having a conversation. I mean, you really bring a new process and technology and a business model that I think is different than anything I've seen in the space before. Why don't you share a little of that with us and talk about how it impacts the people in there?
Yeah, you bet. And that's kind of our biggest, or one of the biggest things that we bring to the table is our ability to meet people where they're at technologically. And I think that, within the mortgage space, I got into the mortgage business in, 2006 when I started my first company. And then at that time, the average turn time for a mortgage loan for, if you're a broker or a bank, was about 32 days. And fast forward to where we are today, and those turn times are, 60, 70 days, and it's getting worse. Over that same amount of time, the technology has gone up. It's vertical platform. Here's the silver bullet that's going to solve everybody's problem. Clearly, it's not working. So our strategy was to not try to say, here's the silver bullet product. This time we promise this is going to work. And I think the big differentiator for us is I've spent so much time in the mortgage business. There's a culture there and an understanding that kind of comes with that's given us a lot of insight into, what the activities are that's going to drive the most value for our lender clients and our escrow clients. And ultimately what's going to be the best or easiest process for the borrower at the end to take a lot of the stress off of, what it takes and what they have to produce and rate locks and, all these very, very chaotic things. And to be honest, Rick, a big part of it, comes down to communication. 99.9% of all problems, I feel like, are communication problems. And certainly this industry is no different. And when you have so many disparate entities and disparate businesses and types of businesses, and, in the mortgage business, every loan officer is their own business in a lot of cases. Every escrow officer is their own business. And so you have thousands of variations. That's sort of been our focus is, okay, let's find out what people are doing right now. And let's just add on to their current process. Let's not have them reinvent the wheel and assume that everyone's just going to love it.
Well, and of course, in addition to the loan officers and the escrow officers, you start with the 1.7 million realtors who all run their own business by law.
Exactly.
So you've got all these independent players and the poor people trying to, to buy a new property and get funding for it. They're caught in the middle of all these entrepreneurs doing whatever they feel is the best thing to do at the moment.
Yeah, exactly right. It's the kind of thing to where, our clients are lenders, our clients are the escrow officers and title companies, and our clients are also borrowers, and our clients are also the notaries that we have that are working for us to complete these signings. So it was a big challenge when I sort of realized that rather than sort of a two-sided facing business, we have a four-sided facing business. But at the same time, if it was easy, it wouldn't be any fun. But that's been kind of the magic of it, though, is that, you really have to understand all four of those personalities. And that, as we pointed out, each one of those personalities is thousands of different variations, and then add in, local geography and, little local customs, and then a whole bunch of different laws and, the state level, the county level, the federal level. It's a big pile of soup, or a big bowl of soup, I should say. And that's what we're out to try to make it easier.
So if I were, getting a refi right now or a mortgage, how would you help me make my world different or better?
Yeah. And that really, again, comes down to our primary tenet here, which is communication, and making sure that the people that care the most about that transaction are working together in a harmonious way to have a positive transaction or positive outcome for the borrower. So in other words, if there's, when it comes time for document preparation, let's say, one of the products that we have that's sort of integrated into our solution system is a way for you to give your mortgage documents, your private documents to us securely, and not to us, but to your lender securely, to your title company securely. I mean, it's sad but true. The industry standard is email and pictures on phones and sending it that way. And, I think if there's anybody in any mortgage professionals listening to this, they're probably smiling right now because they know how many people are walking around with personal documents and thousands of borrower documents on their phones. And I mean, it's just it's a time bomb. So that was a real frustration for us when we were, contemplating the start of the company. Was, how can we make this more secure for the borrower, so we're not going to put them at that same level of risk? People don't need to have their social security cards on some person's phone that they don't even know. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's a big one, kind of out of the gates. And then also at the end, one of the things that we do that's very different is we have the ability to sort of loop in the loan officer or the lender, or whoever it was that's been working with the borrower kind of over the course of the process. In the cases where still a lot of borrowers are still working directly with the loan officer, let's say. In those cases, we're able to make sure that the loan officer is always in the loop of what's happening during the process. So when it comes time to close, and the borrower was expecting a 2.5 interest rate, and it's a 3.5 interest rate, and then someone says, "I'm not going to sign this. What's going on?" And then the notary or the escrow company says, "Well, hey, we'll try to find the loan officer for you and get to the bottom of it. We don't know what happened with the documents." Well, that's a real pain. So what we do is we're able to take the loan officer or the lender's representative and put them into the situation very quickly. So we have that contact, that direct, buyer and seller relationship that should really be there from beginning to end, that just doesn't exist today.
I was going to say, I have been in that exact situation, sitting at a closing and finding out that A, my mortgage rate isn't what I was promised, and B, I need to write a much bigger check than they told me I had to write. I still, that was almost 30 years ago. I still remember that meeting very, very clearly.
Yep. Yeah. It's a problem, and it's one of those things that we now, 30 years ago, we didn't necessarily have the technology to handle it as well as we do now, but now we have the technology. It's just not being adopted. So that's kind of the other piece of it is, hey, we've got these software platforms that we've been talking about that aren't being adopted are still great. They're just not being used. So can we leverage what's already been built and find a better way to insert them into the process so it's, a little bit more downstream and a little bit more natural and intuitive versus, the swivel chair approach of having to sign into 17 different, systems to get the same information.
When you talked about the four faces that you get to deal with, that's such a good example of when we talk about a revenue culture today. It's the fact that a true revenue culture that's going to optimize your ability to be profitable as well as optimize the life of the people in your culture includes your investors, your leaders, your employees, your business partners, your customers, and your communities. And, it sounds like you're right in the middle of that's your offer to the market, is making all those people part of your culture and all getting value.
Yeah. And that's, it's one of the things when we were first getting started, when, I would tell a lot of our frontline representatives, if they want war, they get peace. And it really does, just bringing that attitude to the forefront of it's okay. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Nothing is broken. And just kind of really focusing on that calming aspect of it does help. And it does have an effect on all four faces. And that's not by accident. It's very much a part of what we do and what we preach. And it's part of our core value system. And it begins and ends every meeting is really focusing on that sort of, hey, we can't let the situation get to us. We need to see the bigger picture, and we need to make sure that everybody understands that there's likely a communication breakdown. Well, we've got that solved. We can get the communication lines open, no problem. So yeah, that's very much a common thread that runs throughout the organization and was a found. I mean, it was, you mentioned earlier about, companies that say, oh, hey, I'll work on my culture after I get this revenue thing knocked or things of that nature. And that's, you're going to have a culture no matter what. So if you work on it or don't work on it, it exists. Yep. And you either have a proactive culture or a reactive culture. And a reactive culture stinks. It's chaotic. No one knows what's going on. There's no common thread. A proactive culture, it creates those commonalities and those bonds. And I think when we first started out with our true north, and then we hired accordingly. And we wanted to make sure that we were bringing in people that fit that culture of are they a hothead? Will they be able to stay calm in these situations when the bullets are flying? And because we've been able to do that from the beginning, it starts to feed itself. And now, the little organism starts to grow without you having to water it every day after a while. And that only happens if it's a foundational piece. At least that's been my experience.
Well, I just love that story. And of course, I've always believed that one of the things you do, so you're just such a good example of it, is you start with your purpose. And your purpose is about calming, and it's about spreading the value across the culture. And as I'm listening to your story, it's you've hired to that. And that's one of the things, it's somehow hard for us to communicate to people that when you hire your team, your humans, if they all embrace your purpose, it's so much easier to get them to grow in the same direction, or however you want to think about that. Is that the experience you've been having?
Absolutely. And, when I mentioned core values earlier, I know that, some people are really into them, some people aren't, but the bottom line is that, our central theme, our true north, is cultivating calm. And then we have our core values under that. And the core values are not aspirational. They're a description of who we are when we got this thing started. That way, you don't have to work towards it. You don't have to train people on it. You don't have to wag your finger at somebody. You identify the people that share those values and you bring them into the organization, only if they share those values. And that way, that's what keeps, or in my experience, that's what keeps everybody rowing in the same direction. So it's a big part of it. And it takes work, you have to think it through. It can't be sloppy. And it's not easy for people that aren't used to it to, have to ask these core value-based questions during the interview process. But that's literally one part of the interview is all based on whether or not they're, asking questions, trying to get out whether or not these traits are traits that they naturally identify with, or if they're traits that are aspirational, or if they're traits that they want nothing to do with. That's very valuable to learn early on, because when you're talking about, the ability of your people versus the character of your people, you got to have both. Because if you have a bunch of able people that don't fit any sort of value system, they're running amok, and there is no common thread. On the other hand, if you have people that have the same character, that have the same value system, a lot of times you can train up the other stuff. So I think that's counterintuitive in some ways, but also in the way that it's able to be applied today. It's really intuitive, but it's challenging to start there, because we always want the top producer. We always want the person with the sweet resume. We always want all these things. And then it becomes an afterthought. Well, they're not the best person ever. If they're really grumpy on Mondays, that's okay. And ultimately that starts to abscess over time.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting in the very first part of that story, you talked about it was hard. And, as I was listening to that, I'm going, well, it's hard in the interview process and hard in the onboarding to reinforce it. But once they get on board and they're embracing it, now they become powerful and magic. And,
exactly.
The hard part's in the beginning at the triage. It's not on the ongoing part.
Exactly. And isn't that better? Isn't that better? But yeah, getting the heavy lifting done up front has proven to be a massive accelerator for us in our ability to hit our true north and to generate the revenue that allows us to even contemplate a true north. Because and I think that's where where the revenue piece of it becomes such an important play. And I remember you recommended a great book to me, The Goal, and it does a great job of illustrating that of yes, our purpose is to bring calm from chaos, but if we don't eat food, we can't do anything. So if we don't have revenue coming in, then we can't bring any calm we can bring no calm to the chaos. We stop. So it's very important that everybody understands for us how important that revenue number is and what those profitability lines are. We're very transparent. I know not every organization is, and both ways work, but I do believe it's important that every member of the organization understands that we have to have food for this organism to live, and that food, how we get that food and procure that food, it's important for people to understand. And I think people are more interested than I was surprised at how interested my team was in learning about the revenue streams and how the numbers work and all of that, especially when you're bringing on some younger team members. It seems like it would be boring, but it's not. It creates engagement, or it has for us.
Well, and every CEO I've ever met that has a team, they want their team to help them scale. They want to help them sustain. They want to help them innovate. They want to help them with their relationship with their customers. But if you don't understand the business, you certainly can't scale. You certainly can't sustain. So I always wonder how they think that's going to happen if there's no transparency or no understanding about what we're doing as a team.
Absolutely. And, when I was in my law days, especially early on, I had no idea how any of that stuff worked. I didn't understand the economics of it and didn't care. I was at that time, I was very focused on making sure that employees were getting all of the perks and everything that they needed to be receiving. And I had no understanding of the revenue side of things. And obviously that was a rude awakening to learn exactly how difficult it is to be profitable and to make money. It's not easy. It's really, really hard. And the appreciation of that, I think it goes a long way for every member of the organization to understand, exactly how challenging this is. and that some of these things, can't be taken for granted. And that's why we, have maintain the client relationships that we have to maintain. And that's why we can't allow certain things to fall to this level, because otherwise we're not going to be able to survive, and we can't do all the fun, cool stuff that makes everybody really excited.
Yeah, that's the other thing people don't recognize. If we're not making money, the cool stuff is never going to happen because we can't afford to do it.
Yeah, and it's no fun.
Well, and the other one that you mentioned that I think kind of history has messed with us on is the idea of, I got to hire the A player with, the number one salesperson or the best programmer in the history of MIT or whatever it is they're going after. And they're not thinking about literally 2 to 3 years from now, whatever skill they brought us today will hardly exist in 3 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole lot better to have somebody who loves what we're doing and is continually evolving themselves to keep adding more value to our firm and our clients. So,
the change dynamic. Yeah.
When I got out of school, you could do almost the exact same job for 10 years and not even wink. It could be 20 years and nobody know the difference. Today, I don't know a job like that.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's changing, and it's changing fast. And I think that's the fun part. I think that's the fun part about being an entrepreneur, especially now, is we're now in a sort of a time in business where ideas have never been at a higher premium. And, of course, execution is imperative for ideas to come to fruition, but that sort of round table of everybody having a voice and wanting to hear from the part-time person that's only answering the phones maybe for a couple hours a day. We need to hear what that person's seeing and hearing and what their ideas are. And we need a microphone and get these ideas out there, because it's no longer, I've got the formula, because the formulas are just shifting way too quickly.
Well, it's interesting. When you gave your background, approximately 15 years ago, you were an intern. Now you've gone through, multiple startups and are on a real transitional one right now. And, that's how the world works. You start as an intern, you end up as a CEO running multiple businesses over time.
Well, it's the growth, right? It's, to live is to grow, and stagnation, if you're not growing, then what are you doing? If you're regressing, it's even worse. So yeah, to your point, now more than ever, it's that kind of idea of, hey, we need to be ready to change, and change needs to be part of our culture. And we hear something, we don't want to be threatened by it. We want to be excited by it. It's a different ethos than kind of how I came up.
Well, this is very cool, because one of the things I was going to ask you, and I didn't have to ask you, we've been talking about it, is, how do you build a culture in a company today? So, that's obviously the last 10 minutes of what we've been talking about. Let's switch that for a minute. And if we're back to the Todd is an intern 15 years ago, what would you say to either young people or people in the first third or 25% of their career, and they have some skills and they have some things that are important to them, but they don't even know they have the option to pick a culture or use culture as part of their interview criteria. Do you have advice for those people coming up?
Yeah, I think the thing that popped into my head when you're asking that would be the number one piece of advice is start. It's just taking action. And if you have a better way of doing something, or if you see something or an opportunity to take action, to start doing something. If that's letting somebody, that's a decision maker know, great. If that's, if you have the ability to where it's not going to cause any harm to go do something on your own, great. But that's the best way to learn, because, when you're young and you start doing things and you get kind of smacked a little bit, you get put down and you learn, and you're okay, well, that's not going to work, but let me try this again. So I think that's really it is, kind of start, and perhaps start small. And that way, if, when you inevitably mess up, or if an idea doesn't hit, that's the most important part of being able to truly grow, is learning from those mistakes. But you can't learn from any mistake if you're not out there trying things and you're not actually starting things.
And it was interesting. I hadn't thought of this until you started giving the answer. But one of the things when you're young, and I remember some of these jobs where I did make a mistake, and part of what I learned was, yes, I did something that didn't work, but also I learned maybe I'm in the wrong place, because there's other places where people are doing the same thing and it worked. Maybe I'm just in the wrong organization at this point in time, but that's as important to learning as anything else. How do I pick the place I'm going to work?
Yeah. And how to identify when you're in the wrong place. I've certainly had that experience, and a lot of that comes into, naturally when you're starting out in business, your mentors are the people that have been there longer than you. They're just your natural mentors. And again, you don't necessarily get to choose those folks all the time. That's just, that's who you're with. And it's kind of trying to as early as possible, start looking for those value pieces that, whose values are in line with mine, who's not a jerk, who cares about what we're doing here. Because there's a lot of people that don't care what they do, a lot. And there's a lot of people that may care a lot about what they do, but they're jerks. And, it's trying to find the people that aren't jerks and care. And those are the people to really build the relationship with and create, that mentor-mentee relationship. And those relationships last, 10, 15, your whole life. And so much of that is, understanding, starting with your own value system and going from there and kind of letting that dictate, not letting the mentor that you didn't choose push you into a value system that may not be in alignment with what you believe.
Absolutely. Now, I am curious. I'm just thinking back to something you said earlier. When you interview today and you interview on purpose and values and that type of thing, do you ever have some of the younger people that you interview be surprised by the process or confused or wonder if it's real?
Yeah. And that's part of what I was referring to when I mentioned it's difficult at first, because it's hard to come up with meaningful questions that sometimes drive to a value-based answer. And so that part can be kind of awkward. And especially with the young. Well, now I will say this though, from my experience more recently, that the younger people are really embracing the value-based questions. And you get a lot of thoughtful answers because it's getting them out of what they expected it to be and into a more natural, conversational state. I think that's been a nice little surprise. It is what it is. We have I think 4 generations in the workplace right now, and we kind of talk about it. We do a lot of API integrations. We talk about the generations in the workplace, like the generations of software in the workplace. All of it's capable, but it doesn't communicate very well all the time. So it's a pretty interesting dynamic, but it's just one of those things to where, knowing that, we know that our approach needs to be a little bit different, and we can tailor it that way. But as a very long answer to your question, certainly we're seeing a much more positive feedback chain from the younger people, the fresh out of college, or we have a couple that are still in college. The feedback that they're getting from that, now they understand when we're having our meetings and we go around and everybody shares a core value story, or we're doing our mindfulness before we jump into it. Everybody understands that part of it, because that's kind of how we've been treating this whole process from the beginning. So it helps us maintain those consistency levels. It would be weird if we did this sort of interview process and then all of a sudden we come in and we don't care about anything but your metrics. What are your KPIs? Are you hitting them or you're not hitting them? Well, how are you going to hit them? You're on a performance plan. That would be weird if we did that. So it's kind of an all-in thing, I believe. But at the same time, business is fun, or it should be fun, and it should be a creative process, and it should be something that everybody feels attached to. Or you get the folks that are just mailing it in, or don't really care, or become irritable very easily.
Well, one thing I've got 2 questions for you, but you and I could go on forever. But the first one is, you have to talk to me, and you and I have had the conversation before, about mindfulness and how you use that as a very important part of growing your organization and getting everybody on the same page? Because I know it's not just something you write on the website, it's something you guys really live.
Yeah, it's a big one. And that speaks to our true north. That speaks to our purpose of cultivating calm from chaos, because a lot of times you have to work for calm. It's a paradox, but you have to exert energy to be calm. And it's a weird one, but at the same time, it's, because everybody understands, and people answer our ad because they see that that's our purpose, right? So the people that are coming and responding to us typically are open to mindfulness and meditation and breathing techniques and these things that we kind of practice together to teach us all a couple of tools to de-stress situations. Because when you're out there when the bullets are flying, and a lot of this comes, not to use too much of the metaphor, but one of our employees, Charlie, she's actually a mindfulness coach. And so she brings a new technique every single meeting. And she was explaining to us that, with one of the techniques that they teach Navy SEALs is a breathing technique, because, you can go without water for a certain amount of time. You can go without food for a certain amount of time. You can't go without breathing for more than a couple of minutes. So you got to control that, because that's sometimes all you can control. So one of the techniques that Marines are taught, or that SEALs are taught when they're deployed over enemy lines, is a box breathing technique. And it's so simple, but since she's done that presentation, I've sometimes when I can't sleep now, I start doing the box breathing piece of it, and it works. There's a magical component to it where we physically respond better when we actively work on the inner. So yeah, that's I think it would be weird, not weird, but maybe it would be different if that wasn't such part of our consistent messaging. But because that's kind of we're looking to attract the people that really want calm, and people that are interested in calm are typically interested in silence and in breathing and in meditative practices and all the stuff that we're trying to put out there for our people as much as possible, and also to anybody else that's interested.
That's fascinating. I love it. Because I know your industry can be very chaotic the last week of the month and the last Friday of the month. And, certain days like that, it's just absolute pandemonium. So,
yeah.
So here's the last question for you, because, as I look at Notaru and the work you're doing, you're in you're a kind of poster child for we're tying together a lot of human beings who typically done things for a long period of time. And we're tying together a purpose of bringing the calm, and we're bringing technology in the middle. So talk about, what it's like to try and manage those three dimensions or three, areas of importance to come up with something, meaningful and powerful that's aligned to your purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think that the sort of central theme there is harmony, and trying and striving for harmonious interactions and both the technology and integrating technology into a way to where you have very disparate and very sometimes oppositely dated systems working harmoniously together to where they can speak to each other. And the same thing, we call it human integration, because there are so many people that we work with. Well, we use the technology to facilitate the natural harmony that human beings want. Nobody wants chaos. Nobody wants deals to blow up. Nobody wants to do a bad job. Nobody wants to be the weak link in the chain. Nobody wants that stuff. So we try to create opportunities to make it easier for people to naturally harmonize together. And that's, I think that's really the common thread through this, is whether it's, systems, whether it's people, whether it's employees and how they interact with clients and vendors. Harmony is just a better way of life. And even if we have to work a little harder for it, the rewards on it are far exceeding the amount of effort we have to put forth to achieve it.
Wow, I love that. And I don't know how we ended up that as the last question, but I don't know how you can top that question or the answer. That's really spectacular. As much as you and I have worked together, I hadn't heard the harmony as a way to evaluate, measure, consider my actions next. I just love that. It's a great way to, help people, the true north piece. It's wonderful. Harmony's, right up there next to the north.
Yep.
If you got harmony, you got almost all of it.
Yeah, and it's and I think of it. I've recently taken up sailing, and you think about that when you're trying to harmonize yourself with the wind, and you're trying to use technology, sails, and things like that to kind of harmonize with the earth. There's a baseline there that we all have a primordial yearning towards. For some reason we understand that what we're in swing and that we're working as a team, that's cool. So now if we all understand that, then let's put a little more effort into making that something that we're actively trying to achieve at all times. So that's been it's been work, but again, it's kind of the labor of love. Yeah.
It's interesting. You bring up the sailing and the harmony. Many years ago, I was a competitive water skier, and to me, water skiing was all about harmony, and it was the combination of the wind and the little laps on the waves and the speed of the boat and the length of the rope and, the sun and all that stuff. But if you could get into the harmony with all that, there was something so peaceful and so wonderful about it. And you were a much better competitor because you were just part of the course instead of, forcing yourself through it.
Yeah, you start to notice the subtleties, and that inches make massive differences, and very slight movements can have huge differences in outcome. And that's kind of a cool thing to discover, the power of those little, of that sort of insight and that experience, and really focusing on really trying to get to the details of things. When you can kind of experience that power, it's a cool thing.
Well, and what a difference when your team is using harmony as part of their lifestyle, their work style. I mean, you get a very different culture when their primary purpose is compete or beat or overcome or, whatever those other descriptive words are. And, when you're trying to build a culture that is infinite in nature, boy, what a great way to think about it.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, we do sort of do some disruptive things with our company, but we really like to consider ourselves kind of creators and not destroyers, in the sense that, we don't have, there's nobody in our sights that we're trying to take down, or there's no one that we view as a competitor that we can also figure out a way to work with. And I think that gives us an advantage, certainly with our partnerships and the people that we attract around us, our stakeholders and our key clients. We build very, very deep relationships because, again, we choose our clients based on our core values, and we choose our clients based on our willingness or our ability to harmonize with them naturally, versus trying to change and be a different person for every different client, or the customer is always right and all that. That's just not our style. I mean, we do believe that our customers are right. I'm not.
Yeah, you're gonna bring them value, but sometimes you gotta teach them something new.
Yeah, well, and sometimes it's not the right fit, and that's pretty easy to tell. And when it's not the right fit, it gets chaotic, and we don't do chaos. So it's very important for us to find them.
I love the harmony, because if I were a partner, or if I were a customer, or I was just part of your whole real estate community, I'd much rather hang out with people who are in harmony than people who always want to be combative. I mean, come on, which table do you want to sit at?
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely. And again, especially because we are, a very integration focused company, it's just a natural, it's almost like the act of the company sort of is the effect of the cause of the company, which is the purpose, and if you focus on the purpose, then the effects kind of take care of themselves in a lot of ways. And you just kind of end up working with the right people versus focusing on the effect. We need to get all this business. I don't care how we get it, just get it, tends to work against you in the long run.
I love it. Like I say, we could go forever, but this has been really, really good, Todd. Every time we talk, I learn something. So that
Likewise.
makes for good conversation. So
yeah, and I think this is the first time I think I don't have a book of notes written from our discussions. But yeah, I've got plenty of Rick chapters in my notes here.
well, and now we got it on video, so we don't have to even write it down. So
Exactly.
I want to thank you. I think this has been great. I certainly wish you and Notaru the absolute best. I know you guys are going to continue to help remove chaos from other people's lives and bring them calm. So
yeah, well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And yeah, anytime. I always love catching up with you, and the time always flies. So thanks for having me be a part of this, and I'm super excited and love what you do, love your messaging, and love that your ability to take the complex and make it very, very simple. Really simplify things that are challenging for a lot of people. So I think what you do is great, and I'm always happy to chat with you.
well, thank you. And I thank everybody for joining us this week. Todd's a great asset, and we're glad that we could have him. And we'll have another one in 2 weeks after this. So thank you for being here. Todd, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rick.